Thank you, Nina. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's nice to be back up here. I was telling Nina and the board last night, last time I was in Grand Rapids, I was probably, about half my age, and Jerry Ford was president. So it was nice to look out and see his library across the street from the hotel. So that was rather nice. And at the break, I can't leave home without my kids. I miss my kids at school. So I've got a little thing that goes on and why Rawson Saunders is special. And the school was named after Margaret Rawson and Roger Saunders, two of the cornerstones of dyslexia. So I'll just play that for you and kind of see some of the kids. I take them everywhere I go because my heart and soul is just with my kids, and maybe you can just see a little what's special about my kids too. But we're going to talk about evaluating dyslexia, and Guinevere and Stephen talked about a lot and setting me up for success. And my success is going to come in and keeping you awake this afternoon. I know that. But the first thing we're going to talk about is what do you test and why? Because a lot of people think that testing for dyslexia has to do with testing a whole lot of things, and I know people like to test. And they like to test, and not really do much of anything else. And then some people say, well, I can't test. I'm just a teacher. And so we're going to talk about that. And we're also going to talk about what are your tester qualifications. Well, if you have an education degree and you're teaching, or you're a special educator, any test that I talk to you about today, except for one, you're qualified to give. Except for one, you can give it. So no territorial wars of peeing in corners or whatever, and saying, this turf's mine, you can't have that one, and that. You can give all of these tests except for one, and you have to have a papal dispensation from different areas. And I'm Catholic, so I can say a papal dispensation. My husband's becoming a deacon, so I can say that, but and I don't mean that lightly, but I mean, you just have to have, I've got 123 hours postmasters, and I still can't give the whisk. Okay, I still can't give it. But you can interpret it. You can look at it, and it gives you a lot of valuable information. That's the only test that I'm going to talk to you about today that you can't give unless you're a diagnostician or you're a psych associate or you have that dispensation that you're allowed to do it. And then how do you report these scores to others? Well, one of the things that we want to talk about truly is we really want to look at standard scores, because standard scores are the gold measure. And that's where we really want to talk about. And as professionals should understand standard scores because it's based on statistics. And I know there's, as Mark Twain once said, there's lies, damn lies in statistics, and you can get them to say just about anything, but those are normed. And when you're talking about standardized test scores that are normed on thousands of children, what you really need to get down to are standardized scores, and when you're looking at those. And when you start saying, well, I think he made some progress, versus standardized scores, you can see how much he's made. And we're going to talk about these scores in terms of the versus, when you start looking at them, you frequently have a choice between grade equivalency and age equivalency. And when you're talking about dyslexic children, we want to look at them in terms of grade equivalency. And why is that versus age equivalency? Think about it. If you were my fourth grade classroom in here, in fourth grade, I might be in fourth grade, I might have 9-year-olds, I might have 10-year-olds, and there might be a few 11-year-olds floating around in here. Now, if I were testing all of you, or evaluating all of you for dyslexia, and I was looking at my scores from my standard scores, and I start looking at age equivalencies for it to norm those things, how would that look? Would all of you, or for grade, let's go back to grade equivalencies. If I was looking at grade equivalencies to norm these, wouldn't all of you now be in the fourth grade, second month of school? Okay? No matter if you're 9, if you're 10, or you're 11, right? So I can look at all those, say, and I can compare you against the thousands of children nationwide, whether you're in Grand Rapids, Michigan, or you're in Rapid City, Iowa, or you're in Podunk, Texas, right? We can do that. But if I started looking at age equivalencies, how am I going to compare that? Because other 9-year-olds might be in third grade. There might be a few 9-year-olds who are in second grade. There might be a few 9-year-olds who are in fourth grade or fifth grade. And there might be 11-year-olds who are in 5th or 6th grade, and a few of you are sitting here in 4th grade. So you don't all have the same educational experience. So the first thing we want to do is be able to have you all equalized, so we want to look at grade equivalencies. That's why that's important. So if with dyslexia, we want to look at grade equivalencies for children when we're comparing standard scores. Also, grade equivalencies are more important than age equivalencies, because when you're looking, if you've got to compare, if you say, well, there's a test that doesn't give me standard scores, Pat, it only gives grade equivalencies or age equivalencies. And age equivalencies, don't look at those, go with grade equivalencies with children. Percentiles are okay. Percentiles are okay, that's all right. But do you know that 40th percentile, here's an alarming statistic, 40th percentile is considered passing on all state tests. Did you know that? On your high stakes testing, whether it's Michigan, whether it's Texas, I don't care what it is, but the DIBELS, Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skills, how many of you are familiar with DIBELS? Good. DIBELS is normed at 40%, which is passing. That's so you can pass, whoever passes DIBELS or Ames Web, if you're familiar with Ames Web, how many are familiar with Ames Web? Okay, Ames Web too, and that's because that's from the same people that did DIBELS essentially. That is normed so that you can pass. If you pass, you get through that huge net, the big holy pieces of either DIBELS or Ames Web, you are more or less guaranteed that you are going to pass your high stakes testing in your state. That is a sad statement. Now, would you like to get a 40% on your exam? That's low. That is low, low, low. Okay, so when you start looking at percentiles, start looking at standard scores. All right, off my soapbox on that one. Permitted time between administrations. Another thing you need to consider is, why do tests come in different forms? You got a Form A, you got a Form B, you got a Form G, you got a Form H. You got different formats of the same test. The reason is because you have to read the test manual, imagine that, but you have to read that to figure out, because kids learn the test if you give it to them too often. And it will tell you how often between administrations you are permitted to give that test. So that's why they give you different forms of the same test that you're allowed to give. And for crying out loud, if it's the first time that you've given that test, have somebody observe you, or give it to your significant other, your own kid, the first couple times. Or better yet, tape record it when you're giving it, so that you can come back and you can tape record and you can listen to your responses. Because the problem is that some of those you can't go, honey, what did you just say? Because some of them you can't have the child repeat responses on that. So you can't go back and have them do it, or you invalidate the testing. Now, what do you test? Now, for dyslexia, a lot of times people say, oh, you have to test for IQ. Do you see IQ up there? No. Did you hear Guinevere talk about IQ this morning? No. There is no IQ anywhere on here to be found. The big thing first that you need to talk about, and I guarantee you by the time, if you stay awake this afternoon, by the time you leave here, you too will be able to tell the difference between dyslexics and hyperlexics and just garden variety types of reading disabilities. That's my pledge to you by the time you leave here.